As the genocide and starvation campaign in Gaza continue, with dozens of people dying due to malnutrition and starvation, after this campaign that is being conducted by Israel and the Genocide Humanitarian Foundation, that is called the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, causing people constant death and misery and destruction, killing people in camps, Israel didn't take its eyes off the West Bank. And this is something extremely dangerous. The Israeli Knesset just voted by vast majority for a non-binding motion, they're calling it, but it's very important, calling to annex the West Bank. I'm going to talk to you about this in this video, alongside very important reports coming about the second war with Iran being prepared in Israel, more attacks coming from the Palestinian resistance, Ansarullah launching hypersonic missiles again, and also a very serious incident that took place in the Israeli Air Force that included 3 soldiers being suspended for sabotaging Israeli drones during Israel's campaigns and attacks against other countries. Let's begin with this report here, the Israeli Knesset and the vote for this motion. Israel firstly considers everything between the Jordan River to the sea the promised land of Israel. The greater land of Israel, or the fully promised land of Israel, stretches from the Sinai Peninsula and even parts of Egypt up to parts of the Gulf countries. But in Palestine, they constantly say, and they say it out loud, everything belongs to us, from the river to the sea. In Gaza, they are implementing a campaign of genocide that is intended to ethnically cleanse the population. But the West Bank has a bigger population than Gaza, therefore making it a bigger aim, ultimately, and in the long run, for Israel to take control fully and take full sovereignty over the West Bank. That's why Israel withdrew previously from Gaza, because they hardly had any squatting establishments, or what they call settlements, and they focused on the West Bank because the West Bank has a bigger Palestinian population and it stretches across a wider geographical area with more natural resources that Israel controls to this day. What did they say in this motion? Why are they calling it non-binding? Of course, everything starts with things that are called non-binding. But at the end of the day, there are people inside of the government, from the top to the bottom, who call to annex the West Bank like they call to annex the Gaza Strip. They said in this resolution that the West Bank is an inseparable part of the land of Israel, the historical, cultural, and spiritual homeland of the Jewish people, and that Israel has the natural, historical, and legal right to all of the territories of the land of Israel. So far, just Palestine. Tomorrow it'll be Mecca, other parts of the Levant, and then, Egypt again, because they said Egypt and Sinai, they didn't want to get rid of them. It called the government to apply Israeli sovereignty, law, judgment, and administration to all the areas of Jewish settlement of all kinds in Judea and Samaria, as they call it, and the Jordan Valley. So you're talking about moves that would want to lead to the full implementation of what is called Israeli sovereignty over the area. Now, so far, Israel de facto controls the West Bank. Why do they need that, and why are they going on these motions now? It's because they're facing global pressure with more recognition of a Palestinian state over the 1967 borders. And despite that, the fact that this recognition is symbolic primarily, this bothers Israel, because to them, they don't want countries, especially allies, to give the Palestinians any sort of right to the land. You're talking about people in the government of Israel who do not recognize the existence of a Palestinian people. To them, the Palestinians are the invaders. But those who migrated from Europe and the United States and other parts just in the past 70 to 100 years, no, they are the original people who came back to their land, according to the Israeli narrative, of course. What do we conclude from this? Well, that the genocide in Gaza and the ethnic cleansing campaign and starvation can be very easily replicated in the West Bank at the time of choosing of Israel, by the way. And because the world failed to stop this genocide from going on in Gaza, and the hideous scenes, the unbelievable images of suffering of the people from the starvation that's going on now in Gaza, how are they going to stop them from implementing that in the West Bank? Who's going to stop them? Jordan? Because they're going to consider that a threat to their borders, or what? They've been committing a genocide and starvation campaign on the borders with Egypt, with the Egyptian authorities not lifting a finger or not even getting aid in. Today they said 36 trucks of aid got into the Gaza Strip, and some people are celebrating that across the world. 36 trucks of aid. The Gaza Strip had 500 trucks going into the Gaza Strip when all of the warehouses were full and all of the houses were full and everything was functioning normally. Now, after a full-blown genocide and destruction, you need 3,000 a day. And Israel is saying, oh no, we're allowing aid to go in with this genocide humanitarian foundation of theirs with the United States. And if they're allowing 35, 36, that means they can allow 3 and 4 and 5,000. This is a satanic and very carefully engineered experiment that Israel is conducting in Gaza, in a way to apply pressure on the civilian population, leading to deaths of infants, of fetuses, of babies, of elderly, of men, of women, just because they don't have food to eat. People go and fight over a bag of flour that Israel allows its gangs to steal anyway in Gaza, the ISIS-linked terrorists of theirs, and hardly anyone ends up with anything, because the criminal gangs that Israel gives the aid to go and resell it at a ridiculous price. It reached a level where a kilo of flour can reach $100. Imagine that. All of that is carefully engineered by Israel and America. Forget about, the talk at the United States. And no. The United States involved 100%. Likewise, any of the other Israeli allies. Of course, Israel is on another level, but they're still participating with them. And this shows you that this Zionist greed doesn't stop. And it proves yet again that this is an expansionist, colonialist project. This is not just a temporary project or a project of having a Jewish state, a small, tiny, mini, because we don't have anything across the world, which is a lie, by the way, they have. But it's an expansionist entity that wants to control everything that it can, in line with the statement of Ben Gurion himself, the first prime minister of Israel, one of the founders of the state of Israel, who said that the borders of Israel are where the foot of our last soldier steps on. So the more we can take, the more we will. Another alarm for those who have a pair of eyes. That's with this report here. Secondly, they went to attack Iran. Benjamin Netanyahu went on attack with Iran to save himself, by the way. It has nothing to do with harming Iran's capabilities or anything of the sort. They can't beat Iran. They can't beat Hamas and the Palestinian resistance in Gaza. Forget about them beating Iran. These people are a paper tiger, nothing else. Yeah, harming a few people, killing a few people here and there, of course they can do that. But making Iran surrender? No way, you can forget about that. But now it appears that this is not the only attack, and now the previous IDF chief of staff and ally and member of the cabinet, who was a member of cabinet in this genocide in Gaza, Benny Gantz, is saying that we are probably on the way to a second war with Iran. And the reason, according to Benny Gantz, is the reason that also Benjamin Netanyahu stated, which is, and likewise, by the way, the American administration led by Trump, which is it's better off for Iran not to have a nuclear program. But if they do have a nuclear program, that means we're going to have to attack them again. So from their perspective, Now they're saying that we harmed their capabilities to a very high level. So they're giving themselves an excuse not to attack. However, they're already preparing the next excuse when they're going to say that Iran did not adhere to the agreement, and whatever agreement, by the way, because Iran didn't agree to anything. And we're going to have to attack them again. This shows you how everything is fragile with the existence of the state of Israel. With the existence of Zionism, nothing is stable. Even if they have a ceasefire today and tomorrow or the day after, nothing will ever be stable. So long as you have a genocidal, psychopathic apartheid entity killing people all across the world, either directly through their air force or through sabotage or whatever it is. So this ceasefire that they declared with the Americans, by the way, the American administration, is a very fragile one. Because despite the fact that Iran conducted responsive measures because they were attacked, and they said, we will not attack unless we get attacked again, this shows you just how fragile this ceasefire is. Moving on to the other thing that I wanted to talk to you about, which is the Palestinian resistance. The Palestinian resistance published more footage now of their recent operations in Deir el-Balah. Deir el-Balah is an area in the central part of the Gaza Strip that Israel previously did not enter with ground forces. And Israel suspects that there are many prisoners of war, there could be prisoners of war in that area. But despite all of that, they decided to go and attack that place. Why? Again, so that they can apply pressure on the Palestinian resistance. As soon as they got in, they started getting a huge beating from the Palestinian resistance inside of Deir el-Balah, with the Palestinian resistance publishing this video earlier on their Telegram channel of these attacks. What did they do? They targeted the soldiers and the machinery in Deir el-Balah as they were going in as part of David Stone's campaign of the Palestinian resistance against the genocide army and the genocide state. And in this video, they're saying how they targeted in an area called Abu Huli and Ja'farawi. They targeted the Merkava with a Yasin 105 and 2 troop carriers with, again, a Yasin 105, the dangerous Palestinian-made RPG. As soon as Israel got into the Gaza Strip, the Palestinian resistance began to give them a beating, a huge beating, with these huge attacks. And the reason I say huge is the fact that a Merkava, you're talking about, well, whatever's remaining of Israel's Merkavas, can hold up to 4 terrorists, 4 Israeli terrorists, child killers inside them. Troop carriers, each one of them can hold between 12 to 17 child-killing Israeli terrorists inside them. If the Palestinian resistance managed to take down 3 as soon as they were getting in, this is the troop carrier, by the way. Again, bang, as if it's nothing from the Palestinian resistance perspective. Popping out, recording, simple, straight and forward. Israel is not even looking, it's as if they're not seeing them. They're meters away from them, right? And we already saw, look at the level of explosion. And Israel has nothing to do. And again, we saw, this is where they were dragging the machinery, by the way, after they were attacked. And we saw the Palestinian resistance fighters, by the way, going and targeting Merkavas directly, going into the troop carrier or the tank itself to take down the Israeli terrorists inside of it. This is clearly showing how unprepared the Israelis are. They're going into these areas to apply pressure on the Palestinian resistance, yet when they face the resistance, they don't do anything. They're good against children, against aid seekers, sniping them, killing them. 10 to 50 aid seekers a day at least, apart from the children and infants that they kill on a regular basis, and of course apart from the starvation campaign with the people dying daily because of the Zionist starvation campaign that they're conducting in Gaza. This is not stopping as well Ansarullah from carrying out more strikes with another hypersonic missile that forced Israel to close its airspace again. Ansarullah are reaching levels that no other group or country did, constantly targeting Israel and not stopping up until the last second. They had 5 attacks the day before, and that attack that was carried out yesterday, by the way, wasn't followed by an Israeli attack, proving again the consistent position of Yemen, which has been the only front open 24/7. 24/7, 365, non-stop, up until the genocide stops. Now, Israel the Israelis are saying that they might go on a bigger campaign in Gaza if the Palestinian resistance doesn't accept a ceasefire agreement. And by the way, let me tell you something. I've been covering, and I still will and do cover, the talks in relation to the ceasefire, but one thing needs to be taken into consideration. The Israelis and representatives of the United States administration might release certain information as and when to raise the hopes up of the Palestinian people so they can bring it back down when the Palestinian resistance will still come up with comment here or comment there about the Israeli ceasefire proposal. Because you need to understand very well, what the Israeli and American administrations want is total submission and surrender from the Palestinian resistance, and that is not going to happen. The Palestinian side will not accept a surrender deal to these genocidal maniacs. The American administration is applying pressure on Israel, or supposedly applying pressure on Israel to accept the ceasefire, despite the fact that they constantly support them and are participating in this. But the Israelis are confirming that there are certain concessions. Now, the fact that we reached ceasefire agreements before proves that there can be a path for a ceasefire. But any ceasefire, even if it's declared as a permanent ceasefire, will be temporary so long as Zionism in Israel exist. It's simply not going to be working. You cannot have any peaceful, sustainable solution so long as Israel and Zionism exist on the land of Palestine and even anywhere in the world. So long as they're legal, they're not like criminalized, every single one of them needs to be chased like people are chasing Zionist soldiers now all across the world. Similarly to how they chase Nazis. Zionism is far worse than Nazism. It exceeded Nazism a very, very long time ago. So long as that's available and legit, you're going to constantly have problems. They have been publishing information about this ceasefire up until it reached a point where one of the representatives of a Palestinian resistance movement, Muhammad al-Hindi from the PIJ, came up and said that what the American administration is saying is simply misleading. Why did he say it was misleading? He said because they're talking about one point that we are disagreeing on, although there are several points that we're disagreeing on. Again, why? So they can raise the hopes up high of the population and then all of a sudden make them lose hope. In, again, another attempt to apply pressure on the Palestinian resistance by having, a surrounding that is more upset with them rather than anything else. They do that alongside the killing, the mass killing, and as if it's nothing, of course. They don't report to you on mainstream media about any of the daily real casualties, the hundreds of people that get killed every single day. As if nothing is happening, as if it's acceptable and justified. And as if people being starved to death is totally fine in the 21st century. Now, their soldiers are clearly having a shift. You know, in the beginning of the genocide, 2,000 ran away from the war immediately. People were protesting against Netanyahu on the Gaza borders. That's in the beginning. That's in 2023, in October 2023. But now it reached levels of sabotage in the Israeli Air Force. How? Look at this report here. Serious incident, the Israeli Air Force, 3 soldiers suspected of sabotaging drones. And they said that a soldier and 2 soldiers from the Palmachim base were arrested on suspicion of sabotaging several remotely piloted aircraft, drones. Their detention was extended till next week. Senior IDF officials are saying this is a serious incident, and the IDF spokesman is denying any harm to the operational capability. Why did they say it's sabotage, and why is it clearly sabotage? Because one of them apparently went and took out a core device from these drones that would affect them when they're flying, or potentially explode them, by the way. Because his solicitors are saying that, oh no, he made that by accident, he actually needed help, he wasn't really qualified. All garbage. He's trying to, of course, protect his client. He knew very well what he was doing. So you're talking about Israeli soldiers within the Israeli army who are not happy with how things are going, to a level where they are sabotaging their own Air Force drones. And these could be really big and expensive drones, by the way, not like small drones. Millions they cost, some of them 50 to 60 million. Very, very expensive. And at the same time, the numbers are falling. IDF to draw down reserve deployments by 30% amid soaring fatigue, falling turnout. They're saying in this report here in the Times of Israel that the reservist turnout sinks below 60%. And the number could be much higher, by the way. It shows you how much of a crisis they are in. And despite that, they're threatening with a bigger campaign in Gaza if the Palestinians don't accept this. Dude, you can't have anything. You cannot continue, you can hardly function. They're killing people, they're killing innocent people to cover up the fact that they're failing miserably and trying to flex around and show some sort of power or authority. They couldn't beat people walking with bare feet in Gaza, fighting them with sandals. And now the numbers are dipping more and more people are complaining of fatigue. And the final thing that I wanted to share with you is another example of how the United States always follows Israel blindly. How Donald Trump now is pulling out of the UNESCO, citing anti-American and anti-Israeli leanings. Firstly, with anti-American, he has no proof. He just sometimes says they're pro-China. Why does he say they're pro-China? It's because they're simply not aligned with any power. They're focusing on the heritage, the important sites, sacred sites, whatever it is. But they're not going to take a pro-American or pro-anything stand. They're going to be neutral, as any organization should be. They have done nothing against the United States, the UNESCO, but they have done things that upset Israel. What are the things? Let me give you examples. Resolutions saying that Al-Aqsa Mosque is an Islamic mosque. That upset Israel. A resolution saying that the old city of Hebron in the occupied West Bank is an endangered World Heritage Site. That upset Israel. Resolutions criticizing Israeli actions against these sites. Israel gets upset and they start calling them anti-Semitic, and they're against the state of Israel, and they're like the Jewish people, and they're the enemies of the country. So they've done nothing to Trump. But Trump, from an American perspective, the quickest thing that he'll say to appeal to, the idiots. Oh, they're anti-China, they're pro-China and anti-US. Anything, just throw garbage against China, as if China is the biggest threat to the world, not the US itself. As if China carried out all of these 100 wars in the past century, as if China landed a nuclear bomb in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. As if China went and killed millions in Vietnam and in Latin America and in West Asia and in Iraq and Afghanistan, as if China's supporting a genocide. It's the US that's the problem. The United States is the main problem, because without them, there wouldn't have been a genocide. So this move from Donald Trump is proving again just how linked they are with Israel. And despite the fact that Trump tries to, distance himself sometimes and, say certain things, talks about, there's a lobby and there are people pro, people against. At the end of the day, he's still making moves only for the sake of Israel that have nothing to do with the United States or anything to do with any even risk against the United States.